I didn't expect to feel nervous when I moved in. But that first morning in the lake house, I stood still in the kitchen, holding my coffee like it might fall from my hands. Not from nerves, from disbelief. The view from the window looked like a picture I used to keep on my phone. It was quiet. No sirens, no loud neighbors, no constant buzzing of calls and messages asking for help. Just the lake, the breeze, and me. I had made it, and no one gave it to me. Not a parent, not a friend, not alone. Me. Then came the knock. I froze. A part of me knew before I even opened the door. It was them. My mother was smiling, but not warmly. She looked around me into the house like she already lived there. My father didn't even say hello. He raised his eyebrows like he was surprised the place didn't smell like failure. "You really did it," my mother said, stepping in without waiting. She didn't ask if she could come inside. She walked past me like I was a receptionist, not her daughter. My father followed behind her, hands in his pockets, looking around like a home inspector. I didn't speak. I just closed the door slowly and watched as they made themselves at home. My mother walked into the kitchen, opened cabinets, looked inside drawers. She didn't even pretend to be polite. "All this space," she said, her tone flat. "Almost too big for someone like you, don't you think?" That hit me hard. Someone like me. That's what she said. Not congratulations. Not pride. Not even surprise that I'd made it after everything. Just judgment. A cold little jab, meant to cut deep. I didn't answer. My jaw clenched. My father picked up one of my photo frames from the side table. It had a picture of me at the company's launch party, holding a small glass trophy. He stared at it, then laughed once under his breath. "Never thought you'd pull it off," he said. "Guess, miracles happen." That wasn't a compliment. It was a reminder. A reminder that when I left home with nothing, they didn't believe I would get far. I remembered it too well, the way they looked at me back then, like I was already failing. I stayed quiet. My stomach burned. They sat down on my couch. My mother took off her coat and folded it neatly on the armrest. My father leaned back like he was testing how soft it was. It was like they'd done this before, taken over a space that wasn't theirs. "I love how open the kitchen is," my mother said. "Plenty of room for guests. We were just talking, actually. This would be a great house for us. A good place to settle down." I stared at her. She said it so casually, like I should already agree. Like this house, the one I bought, the one I worked for every single day, was something they had a right to. "You mean for you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, for us," she said, smiling. "You're always working anyway. You don't need all this space. You could find something smaller. Something more practical." She said it like it was a kindness. Like I should be thankful she was willing to take it off my hands. My father nodded. "Yeah, it makes sense. We're not asking for anything crazy. You'd still have a room here. Just let us live here full-time. You can come and go." I felt my throat tighten. I looked at the floor. They wanted to move in. Just like that. 10 years ago, they gave me $500 and told me to figure it out. They didn't help with college, didn't help with housing. They didn't even ask where I went after I left. When I struggled through school, skipped meals, and worked overnight shifts, they were silent. And now that I had something good, they wanted to take it. Without asking. Without shame. "You always said you wanted a house by the lake," my mother added. "But maybe it was meant for the family. Not just you." Every word made me feel smaller. Not just you. Of course. Because in their eyes, nothing I earned was really mine. Everything I built was just part of some bigger plan, one where they benefit, even if they never lifted a finger to help. My mother stood up and looked out the window toward the dock. "We could put some chairs out there. Maybe a grill. You know, make it more homey." She didn't ask what I wanted. She didn't care. She just talked like she was already living here. Then she turned to me. "You're not going to fight us on this, are you?" she asked. Her voice was light, but I heard the warning underneath. That tone. I knew it well. It was the same voice she used when I was 17 and said I didn't want to watch my sister while she went out to dinner. The same voice she used when she borrowed the only money I had saved for textbooks and said, "You'll figure it out, you always do. You'll find something else," my father added. "This place is too quiet for someone like you anyway." Again. Someone like you. That phrase. They said it over and over. And every time they did, I felt something inside me harden. Someone like me. A girl they didn't believe in. A girl who worked 2 jobs while trying to get her degree. A girl who ate toast for dinner for 2 years because rent came first. A girl they left behind without a second thought. And now they wanted me to move out of my own house. Because they deserved it. Because I had it. Because I'd made it. I forced a smile. It was small, but I made sure it was clear. "Okay," I said. My mother looked pleased. "See? I knew you'd be reasonable." Reasonable. That's what they always called it when I gave them what they wanted. They talked about sleeping arrangements, who would take which room, how to organize the kitchen. My father asked if I had a list of passwords, just in case anything needs paying. My mother asked if I'd be willing to put them on the insurance, since it was technically your house, but it's for all of us now. I didn't argue. I didn't push back. Because I'd already decided. That night, I lay awake in the guest room. They'd taken the master. Of course they had. I stared at the ceiling. I remembered everything. I remembered when I was 18, standing in the driveway with my bag, and my father saying, "You'll be fine. You're not like your sister, you're tougher." And then turning back inside and closing the door. I remembered working through pneumonia because missing work meant I couldn't eat that week. I remembered watching from a distance as they posted pictures of family dinners I was never invited to. I remembered wiring them money for rent 3 years ago because their retirement check came late. I remembered every dollar, every skip trip, every late night I spent solving their problems without thanks. I got up, opened my laptop, mortgage, auto payoff, grocery allowance, canceled, monthly cash transfer, stopped, prescription fund, closed, credit card I'd co-signed for my mother, removed. No note, no explanation, just done. The next morning, I made coffee for myself, sat on the back porch. The air smelled like pine and cold water. I heard birds in the trees. No one spoke to me. They were inside, already moving things around, already making plans. And I just sat there, quiet. Because the difference between now and 10 years ago was simple. Back then, they pushed me out. Now, I was the one walking away. And they didn't even know it yet. They didn't say thank you when they left. After spending 2 days turning my house upside down with their opinions, rearranging furniture, and making plans they didn't ask me about, my parents drove away to give me space to think. As if this was some kind of discussion. I closed the front door, turned the lock, and leaned against it. The quiet came back, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like something had been pulled open. Something I hadn't looked at in years. I walked through the kitchen slowly. Everything was slightly off. Chairs moved, mugs switched around, papers shifted. Little things. But they felt like fingerprints I hadn't invited. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with a blanket and watched the moon reflect off the lake. I tried to calm myself, but instead, I kept seeing their faces, hearing their voices, playing it all back. Not just from this week. From years. From everything. And I started to remember. I was 11 when I realized my parents didn't look at me the way they looked at my sister. When she drew a picture of a dog, they hung it on the fridge for weeks. I once won a science fair ribbon, 3rd place, nothing huge, and they put it in a drawer. I remember watching my mom gently press tape on the back of my sister's paper, smoothing it with her palm like it was precious. When I asked where my ribbon went, my dad shrugged and said, "Well, 3rd isn't really something to brag about, honey." I pretended it didn't matter. But it did. At 13, I started cooking dinner because my mom said she was too tired lately. She never asked my sister to help. If my sister offered to set the table once a month, it was a celebration. I did it every night. No one mentioned it. Not once. I remember one day I burned the rice. It stuck to the pot. My dad sighed and said, if you're going to do something, at least do it right. No one asked if I was okay. No one said thank you for trying. I stayed quiet. I scraped the pot clean myself. By the time I turned 16, I had stopped asking for anything. When college brochures came in the mail, I put them in a folder in my room. I filled out applications in secret. I paid the fees with money I made tutoring other students. My parents knew I was applying, but they didn't help. My mother said, "You know we can't afford that." But a month later, they surprised my sister with a car for her birthday. It wasn't brand new, but it was nice. Red. She squealed and hugged them like she'd won something. I stood in the doorway and clapped. Quietly. When I got accepted into 3 colleges, no one made a big deal. I told them at dinner. My mom said, "Well, we'll see what we can do, but don't expect too much." My dad didn't look up from his plate. He said, "That's great, kid. Just don't go getting any ideas. College doesn't mean success." A lot of people still end up working for someone else. It felt like every step forward I took made them lean further back. The day I left home, I had 1 suitcase. My dad gave me $500 in cash. He handed it to me like he was doing me a favor. "Don't blow it all at once," he said. My mom stood in the hallway. She didn't hug me. She just said, "Call if you get into real trouble. And don't be dramatic." That was it. No goodbye. No pride. No hope. I sat on a bus for 6 hours with the window fogging up beside me and that envelope in my lap. I remember counting the money twice, over and over. I told myself I'd be okay. I didn't believe it. The first year away was hard. I slept on a blow-up mattress that kept losing air. I worked in a sandwich shop where the manager yelled if I took longer than 5 minutes to eat. I studied between shifts. Sometimes I missed meals. Sometimes I cried into my jacket sleeve on the walk home. I called home once. My mom answered. I told her I was doing okay, even though I wasn't. She said, "That's good. Your sister's doing great. She might switch majors again, but she's finally thinking about something creative. I think she's found her thing." She didn't ask about my classes. She didn't ask if I needed anything. I stopped calling. Years passed. I worked hard. I finished my degree. Got into the startup with a friend I met in class. I stayed late. Learned everything I could. Took side jobs to pay rent. Still sent birthday cards. Still sent thinking of you texts. Sometimes they replied. Sometimes they didn't. When I finally started making real money, it didn't feel real at first. It felt like a trick. But then I looked around. I had paid off my student loans. I had helped 3 coworkers with their portfolios. I had built something. And still, I kept giving. I paid off my parents' overdue gas bill one winter. Quietly. They didn't say thank you. My mother texted, "Glad it worked out." We were freezing. I covered a dental procedure for my dad. He didn't ask me directly. My sister called and said, "He's been in pain and you're doing well now, right?" I didn't argue. I just wired the money. Then they started calling more often. Always with a question. Always with a need. "We were wondering if you could look at this bill. Do you know anyone who can help with our taxes? Your sister is in between jobs again. Can you help her with rent?" I said yes. Every time. Because I thought maybe this was the way to be seen. Maybe they just didn't know how to say thank you, but they felt it. Maybe being useful would turn into being loved. But it didn't. It only made them expect more. Now, sitting in my own home, the home I bought without their help, I couldn't stop seeing it. All of it. Every missed birthday. Every compliment they gave my sister that they never gave me. Every chore I did without being asked, while they praised her for doing the bare minimum. I remembered being sick in high school and still making dinner. I remembered losing a scholarship by 2 points and being told, "Maybe you're not trying hard enough." I remembered hearing my dad say to a friend at a party, "Yeah, my oldest is smart, but she's got no people skills." I remembered my mom sighing when I cried about rejection letters, saying, "You always take things so personally." I remembered asking for help with a resume and my father saying, "You're smart. Figure it out." I remembered the exact moment I stopped expecting kindness. And yet, I still sent money. I still answered their calls. I still dropped everything when they said, "We need you." I still picked up when they didn't even ask how I was. But now, after what they said at the lake house, that I didn't need it, that they deserved it, that I could find something else. Something cracked. I wasn't angry the way people think anger looks. I wasn't yelling or slamming doors. It was quieter than that. It was like a door had closed inside me, and this time I was the one who closed it. They had erased me so many times over the years that I had started doing it to myself. But not anymore. Not now. They weren't just ungrateful. They were comfortable taking everything from me while pretending I never gave anything at all. And that silence? The years of not being seen, not being celebrated, not being chosen, it was no longer something I could carry. It was time they felt it too. They were still living in the house. 3 days after they arrived and declared it should be for the family, my parents had fully moved in like they had never left. My father parked his car in the driveway as if it had always been his spot. My mother hung her coat on the hook I'd picked out at an antique store last fall. They had taken the master bedroom. Not with a question. Not with a discussion. They just did it. They didn't ask if I was okay with it. They didn't ask if I had plans. They just assumed I'd adjust. Like always. That morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw my father pouring the last of the orange juice into a glass. He didn't look up. He didn't say good morning. He drank it in 3 long gulps, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and set the glass down in the sink without rinsing it. "Can you grab more when you're out?" he asked. Not please. Not thank you. Just another request. My jaw clenched. Sure, I said, because I was used to saying it. Then I turned and saw my mother at the table. My laptop was open in front of her. She looked up, smiling. "I hope you don't mind. I needed to look something up about property taxes." I did mind. That was my work laptop, my private space. But she didn't care. "You should really consider putting the house in all our names," she added, clicking something without permission. "It's safer that way. What if something happens to you? It should stay in the family." I didn't answer right away. I looked at her fingers, still on the keyboard. Resentment swelled in my chest, slow but steady. Not just because of what she said, but because it was so easy for her to say it. As if I wasn't a person. As if I was just a service. A resource. A step in their plan. Every word they spoke reminded me that they hadn't changed. They hadn't grown. They had only learned how to ask for more without sounding guilty. Later that day, my father walked into my home office without knocking. "I was thinking," he said, "we should redo the bathroom. That tile is outdated." He was serious. He wasn't offering to pay for it. He wasn't asking if I wanted to. Just telling me. I watched him stand in the doorway, arms crossed like a manager waiting for someone to agree with him. "I'm sure you can handle the cost," he added. "You're doing well now. Might as well enjoy it." Enjoy it. That word hit hard. Because I wasn't enjoying anything. I was surviving under a smile, the same way I always had. I went back to my laptop without a word. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. But that night, I made a decision. Not out of rage. Not out of spite. Out of something quieter. I was done. After dinner, a meal I bought, prepared, and cleaned up while they watched TV, I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and opened my banking app. Everything I had built to support them, every system I had in place, I started shutting them off, one by one. Mortgage, canceled. Electric bill auto payment, stopped. Monthly medication allowance, deleted. Cell phone plan, removed. Emergency fund transfers, closed. The joint grocery card they used, deactivated. With each click, I felt my chest loosen. It was slow at first. I had to fight the habit of guilt. I had to remind myself that I wasn't doing anything cruel. I wasn't punishing them. I was just stopping. Stopping the bleeding. Stopping the giving. Stopping the quiet belief that I owed them something just because they were my parents. I didn't write a message. I didn't explain. They didn't ask when they took over my space. I wouldn't ask when I took it back. The next morning, I got up early. The lake was still and gray under a cloudy sky. I made my coffee and sat on the back porch. Alone. They were still asleep, probably in my bed, under the quilt my friend had made me as a graduation gift. I didn't care. The cold air felt clean. My hands wrapped around the warm mug, and I sat there for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Around 10 a.m., I heard my father's voice through the open door. "There's no internet. Did you forget to pay the bill?" I didn't answer. I kept sipping my coffee. A few minutes later, my mother came out holding her phone. "Did the cell plan change?" she asked, frowning. "It says no service." I looked up and met her eyes. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I just said yes. She blinked. "Why?" I decided I'm not paying for it anymore. She stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. "But we rely on that." "I know," I said. That was all. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. I turned back to the lake. The silence after that was long. They didn't say thank you. They didn't say sorry. They just looked confused. Offended, even. I didn't care. They spent the day moving slower, like the weight of the world had suddenly shifted onto their shoulders. I didn't ask if they needed anything. I didn't offer to help. I just stayed quiet. That night, they made their own dinner. It wasn't good. They argued about how long to bake the chicken. My father said he didn't like the seasoning. My mother said she was tired. I heard it all from upstairs. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible. A week later, I sent a single email to the mortgage company. The house was paid up through the end of the month. After that, I would no longer be covering it. I knew what would happen. Their names weren't on the deed. They couldn't stay. But I didn't tell them. I let time do the explaining. The next 2 weeks were quiet. They spent most of the day inside. My father watched old movies on a small TV he brought up from the basement. My mother went through my books and started making piles. She told me she was helping organize. I didn't respond. One morning, I found my college diploma, the one I had framed after finally paying off my loans, sitting on the floor next to a stack of her magazines. When I asked where it had been, she shrugged. I moved it. It looked out of place. Out of place. Like I had always been. I picked it up. Hung it back on the wall. I didn't look at her. The day the eviction notice arrived, they were both shocked. My mother read it twice. "Is this a mistake?" "No," I said. "You can't just kick us out," my father said. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm just not paying for you to stay here anymore." "You're abandoning us," he said, and I saw his jaw tighten the way it always did when things didn't go his way. That was when I finally said what I had been holding for years. "You abandoned me first. 10 years ago. Don't act like this is new." They didn't answer. My mother sat down and put her head in her hands. My father paced in circles, but I stood still. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because they were gone, not yet, but because I had finally chosen myself. I didn't yell. I didn't make them feel small. I just stopped shrinking. And somehow, that was louder than anything I could have said. The email from the mortgage company arrived at 8:12 a.m. Subject: Final notice of non-payment. I read it once, then closed the tab. The date was exactly as planned. That day, the house would officially begin the foreclosure process. I had already moved my name off everything. My lawyers had handled it carefully, quietly, and I didn't feel guilty. Not because I was cold, not because I didn't care, but because I had spent the last 5 years fixing every mistake my parents made, while they treated me like I was never enough until they needed something. I gave them more chances than I can count. I helped them when they didn't ask nicely, and even when they didn't ask at all. I held them up in silence. They never said thank you. Never said sorry. They just expected. That was the part that burned most. Not what they took, but how easy it was for them to take it. How normal it had become. They moved out of the lake house 2 days later. A sheriff's deputy delivered the notice in person. I wasn't there. I had packed my things and left the night before. I didn't watch them go. I didn't answer their calls. But I imagined it. I imagined my father standing on the porch, his arms crossed, trying to argue with someone who didn't care about his pride. I imagined my mother blinking in disbelief, looking at the paper in her hands, asking, "Is this some kind of joke?" It wasn't. The house was no longer theirs to pretend in. 3 hours after the eviction, the calls started. First, my father. I didn't pick up. Then my mother. Then both of them. Then my sister. I didn't respond. I didn't block them either. I wanted them to feel it, the space where I used to be. They left voicemails. "This isn't fair. We didn't raise you to be this cold. After everything we've done for you?" That last one made me laugh. Quietly. Bitterly. Done for me. What exactly had they done for me? When I was 18, they handed me $500 and a half-hearted goodbye. When I got into college on my own, they said, "Don't expect help." When I worked through illness, exhaustion, and heartbreak, they never called. And when I started to succeed, they returned, not to support me, but to feed off me. I stopped listening to the messages. They all blurred together, different words, same tone. Blame dressed as concern. Guilt wrapped in soft voices. That weekend, I went to a nearby cabin I'd booked months ago. 1 room, 1 chair, 1 stove. No distractions. I brought books, tea, my notebook, and I let myself be quiet. For the first time in years, no one was asking for anything. No one needed money. No one needed a ride, or a favor, or a contact, or advice. I slept 10 hours straight. I made pancakes from a box and ate them slowly by the window. I walked in the woods behind the cabin and didn't take my phone. When I got back to town, the pressure had shifted. Now the messages weren't just angry, they were public. My aunt posted on social media about family betrayal and how some people forget where they come from. My cousin tagged me in a photo from 3 years ago and wrote, "Hope you find your way back someday." Even a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in a decade shared a post about the importance of forgiveness. I didn't comment. I didn't reply, because none of them knew the truth. And the people who did? They didn't deserve my words anymore. Then came the group text. A message from my mother, sent to me and several relatives. "We're heartbroken. We just wanted to live together, be close, build something real as a family. We never asked for anything unreasonable. Now we're out on the street and don't understand why our own daughter would do this. If anyone can speak to her, please try. We're worried she's not thinking clearly." I stared at the screen. Out on the street. They had places they could go. Friends. Other family. Retirement savings they never used wisely. But of course, they wanted to paint it as abandonment. As cruelty. Worried I wasn't thinking clearly. That line made something snap. Because for years, I was the one who saw clearly when no one else did. I was the one who paid attention. Who noticed the unpaid bills, the real emergencies. Who carried all the weight while they played pretend. And now that I had stepped away, they were scrambling. Because without me, nothing held together. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired. But underneath that, I felt something stronger. I felt done. They kept calling. Every day. Sometimes 5, 6 times. I muted the numbers. But I watched the call logs pile up. They tried writing letters. I got one in the mail from my father. It was 3 pages long. Half apology, half complaint. "We never meant to hurt you. But you've always been so distant. You never let us in. You made things hard. You always had to be in control." I folded the letter and set it in a drawer. I didn't rip it up. I didn't answer. Because I didn't owe him clarity anymore. Then my mother showed up at my apartment building. She waited by the lobby. I saw her through the glass doors when I came back from the store. She waved, smiled like this was normal, like nothing had happened. I paused. My hands were cold from holding the bag of frozen fruit. I walked to the door but didn't open it. I stared at her through the glass. She moved closer. She tapped the door. "Can we just talk?" she mouthed. I shook my head. Slowly, deliberately. Her smile faded. She put her hand on the glass like that meant something. I turned and walked away. I didn't check behind me. The next morning, she left a note under my door. "You're punishing us for mistakes. But we're your parents." That has to mean something. It did. It meant I had to be the one to break the cycle. Because they never would. It meant that I had to walk away, not because I hated them, but because I finally understood that staying in this dynamic would cost me everything. They would take and never see the damage. Never see me. And I couldn't keep waiting to be seen. They thought I was being cruel. But I was just choosing peace. They thought I was trying to hurt them. But I was just trying to stop hurting myself. They thought I owed them more. But I had already given too much. They weren't used to consequences. They were used to comfort. My effort, my silence. And now they had to face their lives without that. I sat on my couch that night, lights off, the lake visible through the window. There was no music playing. No news on in the background. Just the sound of the wind outside. I held a cup of tea in both hands and breathed in the steam. No one needed me right now. No one was waiting for money or answers or apologies. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way, the kind that grows slowly, like morning light through curtains. I had let go. And the silence they left behind? I didn't rush to fill it. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. I almost didn't open it. I thought it might be another passive note from my mother or one of the cousins who'd started sending vague, guilt-filled cards in place of phone calls. But this one was different. Inside was a single page. "Dear Natalie, you probably don't remember me. 10 years ago, when my father was dying, you sat with him at the hospital. You didn't know us. You weren't assigned to him. But you stayed that night when the nurse left. You held his hand when no one else could make it. You brought him water. You told me, it's okay to rest. You're doing your best." I've never forgotten those words. I saw your name in a news piece about a startup. I recognized your face immediately. I just wanted to say thank you. I think you changed my life, and you never knew. Emily Grant. I read the letter 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. It had been so long since someone said thank you and meant it, without wanting something in return, without twisting it into another ask. Tears didn't fall, but my throat ached. A different kind of ache this time. Not resentment, but relief. Someone had seen me, even just for a moment. Someone had remembered something I'd long stopped trying to earn, kindness, without condition. I set the letter on the table beside me and looked out the window. The lake shimmered in the early sun. It was the same view my parents once tried to claim, saying they'd make it home. That view, that silence. I'd fought hard for it. And they were still trying to take it. The day before, I'd received another email. Subject line, "Can we reset?" It was from my mother. It read like an apology at first, but it wasn't. We all make mistakes. But punishing your family doesn't fix anything. Your father has been really struggling since all of this. He's not sleeping. We want to talk. It's time to move forward. Move forward. That was their way of skipping the hard part. No ownership, no real change. Just a soft request to pretend like nothing happened. I closed the email. I didn't reply. They didn't want to understand why I stopped showing up. They wanted to skip the discomfort and go straight to comfort again, the kind I had always provided. The kind that cost me everything while they called me too serious or too cold. The same day, I got a voicemail from my father. "We don't know what else to say. Your mother's been crying every day. People are talking. Your sister's embarrassed. You've made your point. Are you proud of this? Proud? I wasn't proud. This wasn't victory. It was survival. They still didn't see it. They still believed I had acted out of spite. They still thought this was revenge, a punishment. But the truth was simpler. I had stopped giving. That was it. And when someone's love for you only exists when you're giving, it was never love in the first place. Later that evening, I walked down to the dock behind the house. The water was calm, the kind of still that holds sound without echoing it. I sat with my feet just over the edge. It was cold. I didn't mind. I brought Emily's letter with me. I read it again, slowly. Her words settled in the quiet parts of me, the places I'd kept hidden, too tired to explain. In a way, this stranger knew me more than my own parents did. They had spent years rewriting who I was, the helper, the responsible one, the steady background character in their story. Emily's letter reminded me that who I am, truly, is someone who showed up for people with no expectation of return. And I finally understood something. My value never came from being useful. It came from being real, even if my family couldn't see it. The next morning, I woke up to a knock. I stayed in bed for a while listening. It came again. Softer this time. I knew who it was before I looked. Through the peephole, I saw all three of them, my mother, my father, and my sister. Standing on my porch, bundled in coats, carrying a tray of something that looked like banana bread. The irony stung. They had driven across the state. After everything. After silence, after warnings, after refusal. They still came back. Not to make peace, not truly, but to re-establish the roles they had always been comfortable with. My mother knocked again. "Just talk to us," she said through the door. "You don't have to do this. We're still your family." I leaned my head against the wood. Still your family. Those words used to feel like comfort. Now, they felt like a leash. Family should mean protection, respect, honesty. But in their version, it meant sacrifice, silence, and submission. I didn't open the door. "I made your favorite," my mother added. "Banana bread. The one with cinnamon sugar on top. Just like you liked as a kid." That wasn't true. I hated cinnamon sugar. My sister loved it. They always got us mixed up. Always. Even now. My father's voice came next. "You're throwing away your whole family over something small. You're going to regret this. You don't just shut people out because of a rough patch." I exhaled slowly. A rough patch. That's what they called it. A decade of being ignored, dismissed, used, reduced to a few hard weeks they didn't like the outcome of. I didn't speak. Eventually, they stopped knocking. After a few more minutes of murmured voices, they left the tray by the door and walked back to their car. My sister looked over her shoulder once. Her expression wasn't angry. It was confused. She didn't understand how the person who used to rescue her from every bad decision had become someone who didn't answer texts anymore. But I understood. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't rescuing anyone. And I wasn't lost either. I let them drive away. I left the tray on the porch for the squirrels. That evening, I lit a single candle on my windowsill. Not for show. Not for nostalgia. Just for light. I sat in silence. No music. No background noise. Only the wind brushing the glass. I looked at the photos on my shelves, not of my family, but of coworkers, friends, people I chose and who chose me back. People who saw me, who didn't take my goodness as an excuse to use me. That night, I slept without dreams. I didn't need any. And when morning came, I brewed coffee, opened the windows, and sat with the letter from Emily one more time. It wasn't forgiveness I felt. Not for them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I didn't feel bitterness either. I felt space. Space they no longer filled. Space I had finally taken back. It wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. And the best part? I didn't have to explain it to anyone.